Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to this wonderful conference that we are having for the past 3 days. And this session, we will talk about promoting research culture in universities, generating socially responsible research for sustainability and climate justice. Before we move further, I would set up the context of what to expect. And then, of course, I'll be requesting the speakers to start with the proceedings. So as I read, the title, I would say the value of research work extends beyond the author. It transcends jurisdictional boundaries. However, one must understand the thought processes that a researcher goes through at the time of conceiving a particular thematic area as a part of the research work. Following the session's title, we need to ascertain what are the associated values connected to research and its output in the context of engaging with socially responsible research. We must answer whether societal value is pivotal to any research work and associates itself at its inception. To carry out such a research, whether the existing research ecosystems across universities are geared to develop and imbibe such value. Further, there is a need to ascertain whether ranking of certain works correlates to the value similar to the expected standard under socially responsible research. Therefore, this session broadly should be able to answer these questions, other than other ancillary questions, of course, and they are: how do researchers balance their own interests with institutional and further on with societal interest? Whether all research outputs ought to have a social relevance perspective attached to them. Are there disciplinary advantages and disadvantages when working on socially relevant research? Now that we have set the context, let us focus on the opening remarks, and I'll sort of welcome to start with Professor Evans, who is the Vice Chancellor and President, Griffith University, Australia. Professor Evans.
Thank you, Professor Gupta. Hello, everybody. In Australia, we say g'day, and the good thing about that phrase is it can be used at any time of the day or night. So wherever you are, hello, g'day, and welcome from Australia. Can I begin by acknowledging that I'm talking to you today from the traditional lands of the Turrbal and the Yagara people. They've been on this land for nearly 60,000 years, and much learning, much research, and a very sustainable way of life, and a way of life that was focused on custodianship of the planet rather than ownership or exploitation of the planet existed here long before universities. And if we're talking about sustainable and socially just relevant research, one of the issues, as our chair has already said, is thinking both globally but also locally. And in Australia, the context of colonisation and the context of the treatment of our First Peoples is an incredibly important part of that. Just making a few brief comments thinking about our topic today. I think there are reasons for both optimism but also challenges that we need to be realistic about. To start with optimism, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, I think, have provided a really useful and increasingly salient global framework for thinking about sustainability and climate justice in the one integrated and coherent set of ideas. And there are a set of ideas that researchers in Australia, researchers in India and Indonesia and Europe can all be thinking about in our very different and specific localized ways, but in ways that allow us to connect with the same global objectives. Now, the UN SDGs are very detailed and complex. There are lots of elements to them, but they do give us a broad framework to work together. I think increasingly our young researchers, our students, our stakeholders are enthusiastic and positive. They want to see universities more involved in this sort of work. So there's a good culture around this. So what gets in the way? What makes it hard to do these things? Well, one is the barriers that universities ourselves put in the way of it. We create disciplinary boundaries when we know that many of the problems of justice really require us to work across those disciplinary boundaries. And they can be as simple as the way that we allocate funding, the way that we allocate teaching responsibilities, the way that we bring researchers together or fail to bring researchers together to work on big problems of our time and what we fund as universities. We can also become very focused on things like global rankings, which take into account quite a different set of metrics. So I will note that there are now global rankings also around impact and sustainability. I think governments also have to take a share of the responsibility for sometimes putting hurdles in the way of impact that is around social justice, climate justice, and so forth. In Australia, for example, we've had governments that have become very focused on research as a form of commercialisation and seeing the best and the only form of impact being inventing a widget, selling that widget, creating jobs for people in Australia. And that's not a bad thing. You know, that can be actually a very good, very positive thing, particularly if they're good widgets. But they perhaps have tended to undermine both blue skies research, theoretical, humanities and social sciences, critical research, and also impact that might not have a dollar value attached to it. So we're working, for example, on a big project breaking the cycle of disadvantage with mothers with children in prison. If we can help try and make sure those children have better outcomes and their mothers are better prepared to mother once they exit prison, that makes an enormous social impact, but doesn't make money for anybody. So governments sometimes are too narrow in the way of what they conceive of from universities. How do we try and get over those hurdles? We need to partner internally. We need to partner externally with like-minded other social organisations, and that can include business and industry as well as not-for-profits and government. We have to make sure we communicate the value of our research to the broader community so they stand in the way when governments try and interfere with socially critical or socially relevant research. And we need to be true to our own values as universities, which have, I think, always included positive social outcomes, but also include critical inquiry, even sometimes critical inquiry about some of the things that we might think of as social goods. So I really look forward to the discussion today. I look forward to coming and visiting you at your university in May this year. So it will be great to have a chance to meet with some of you to discuss these items in more detail in person.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Professor Evans. I mean, what you've said is extremely important. You know, working across disciplinary boundaries, funding, there are bigger problems. As, you know, 30 seconds, maybe follow-up question as to, you said about socially relevant research work. Now, who does identify socially relevant research work? And how do we go about in identifying socially relevant research work? Any ideas, and what's university and what's their role in this matter?
So I think there's both a top-down and a bottom-up approach to this. The top-down, we have certainly used the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, as have many universities, to try and give us a good framework of the type of impact that we're trying to have. But the other thing I think universities need to do is work very closely with their local communities, that bottom-up approach. So what is it that's important to their communities? I've got a university in the Gold Coast, which is a beautiful coastal region of Australia, and its marine environment is very threatened by coastal change. So we do a lot of work with that local community on protecting the natural environment of the beaches. Now, that's going to not be at all relevant for some local communities where they might be looking at the problems of people who are living in slums, or they might be looking at the problems of people who are in agricultural communities where crops are failing. So yeah, we're all still working under that broad framework of the SDGs, but we're doing it in a way that's very informed by the needs of the people whose communities we're part of, as well as being part of a global conversation.
Thank you so very much, Professor Evans. Let me now move to Professor Ferrari of University of Edinburgh. Professor Ferrari, for your opening remarks, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to be in this panel. I think it's a question that is much more complex than it seems, and the first aspect of this question is to try to understand, explore and understand the concept of sustainability and the associated practices to implement adaptive measures. So how do we understand this concept, and then how do we implement change across our universities and through our research across the world? I think it's very important to think about sustainability because it has been misunderstood in certain ways over the past 20, 30 years. So the first approach has been the conventional business practice. So we have to continue developing the actions that we normally do. We don't change anything, and this degrades the environment. Then we have green approaches, which have emerged in the last 20, 30 years. We try to limit the damage, try to do some sort of remediation. And this has been useful, but we know that it has not been sufficient. So sustainability approaches began to emerge to try to reach a sort of neutral position where there's no more damage done. So most of the actions that we see across our universities are really focused on the idea of a hope for the future. So we don't damage anymore, we balance our emissions, and therefore we have hope. But the most interesting, I think, is to think about the restorative approaches, the healing, what is already existing in terms of damage, and the reconciliatory approaches that bring about change, a change that is really fundamental in our world, which is based on the relationship between humans and nature. And I think these restorative practices where we can have a significant influence in humanity as we become generative towards nature. So how do we do these across our universities, and very much in relation to the work that we do around research? I think the most important is to organize economic and societal life around the improvement of health, both the human health and the ecosystems health, the extra-human ecosystems. Which requires an understanding of the complexities and the relationships that exist between resources such as energy, water, food, and well-being, and looking at mutually benefiting balances there, which will require new models, new ways of thinking, new ways of making decisions, both at the global level and at the local level, and therefore new forms of governance. So we have, as universities, a key role in enabling these kind of sustainable futures that are economically efficient, resilient, socially secure, fair, and culturally representative of the diversity of global societies. But the approach to achieve these should be rooted on understanding community building, so the collective understanding of our role in enabling change from the local to the global. So moving away from individual responsibility to community of change. And this will need transdisciplinary thinking, adapting the global challenges to local impacts, and international collaboration, which has been previously mentioned and is essential to achieve local interaction and exchange. So these local capacities for the future and the kind of sustainable and inclusive societies should be at the outskirts of our work. And this is through building research capacity, of course, as we are discussing today, that we can begin to create these bridges between civil society, political decision making, the sort of private sector, and academic research. So this regional and global collaboration will be the key pathway, but very much through understanding context, understanding local and international strengths, and developing or helping to develop key activities that will lead local change and global understanding of these challenges. Of course, we need to be aware of the growing inequalities within society, which we need to tackle throughout this process. So these challenges are very much transnational in character, the pandemics, the climate change, but the local impact is where we really require to build human and institutional capacities that will have an impact locally, but of course, collectively will have a planetary impact. And partnerships, equitable partnerships, will be the means to really engage with these challenges. We cannot resolve them with a single state or a single approach. So I think in this context, we really need to think about this shift of ecological regeneration to We know that education and financial optimization have not achieved any significant change in this context, and we need to think about multi-capital approaches that take into account this system value creation, so financial, human, natural capital. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Professor Ferrari. I mean, it sort of raises questions about using a global lens for a local problem. Now, and how do you see the universities coming, and playing their role? Because a global audience may not have the local, the knowledge, right? And how do you see the collaborative agreements coming through and connecting with different universities and being able to convey the message, and how successful they have been?
So in a way, universities have been focused on knowledge creation and knowledge sharing. What we need to do perhaps is to think about the accessibility, the production and accessibility to these forms of knowledge, and establish mechanisms that allow us to develop open and inclusive sort of multicultural approaches to knowledge. And this requires skills, of course, and skills that are going to be very much connected to creativity and curiosity. So we need to develop these capacities together with our academics who are working across research in global environments, and our students, and make sure that they do have a sort of collective sense of change and a sort of shared responsibility for these community of change. So very much about bridging the links between our knowledge creation and the needs of our society across these different global regions.
Thank you so very much, Professor Ferrari. Now let me move to Dr. Kulik, who is representing Moscow School of Management, for your opening remarks, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I will use the pattern set by Professor Evans. Good day, everyone, because everyone is in different locations. I'm personally connecting from India at the moment, but I represent Moscow School of Management, Skolkovo, and I take care of India research at the school. And a few steps down the line, I will explain to you how all this is related to the subject of our discussion. I will also like to thank the organizers of this really very broad, interesting, and kind of meaningful conference, particularly Professor Raj Kumar, for inviting me to speak and for bringing together such distinguished guests and thinkers. It's really interesting to listen to everyone on the panel. So now coming to the subject of our discussion, at the Moscow School of Management, Skolkovo, we have several research centers, and although it is a relatively new school, it is only 15 years old. It is the leading private business school in Russia, and it aims to develop research in various areas. And to this end, the school has set up various research centers. There are research centers focused on subjects such as digital transformation, for instance, and energy center is there. I personally work at the Emerging Market Studies Institute, where we have different country desks, and I take care of India research. And we also have an important sustainable development center at the school. And I would like to tell you a few words about how we partnered between several research centers at the school to bring out a very meaningful and detailed report, which I found, quite important to be published, particularly today. And this research report was called Climate Change Policy of India, China, and Kazakhstan. It was out last year. It was published both in English and in Russian, because we targeted not just a Russian audience, but we wanted to bring it out internationally. And this research report focused on a comparative study of climate change policy of three most important countries in our view. Of course, there is no need to explain why China and India are important in global climate change agenda, but we put Kazakhstan on the list of comparison because Kazakhstan is an important partner of Russia, but also it is a country that wants to play a significant role and become a leader in sustainable development and in climate change policy in Central Asia. Of course, you can speak quite a lot about each of these three countries. I find particularly interesting the part of this report devoted to India's developments in climate change policy. It is important for international businesses, and particularly for Russian business, to understand how country like India is prioritizing climate change, because as you probably know, there is a massive cooperation in terms of energy, in terms of investments in energy and trade in energy, gas, fertilizers, hydrocarbons, as well as nuclear energy. And on this background, it is particularly important to understand where India is going in terms of transformation of its energy sector. And it is not very well known, for instance, in Russia, how important is renewable energy for India and how India is aiming to change their energy mix. And although in absolute terms, the consumption of traditional energy sources would be growing in India in the next decades to come, but in the relative terms, the mix is changing, and the country is giving more and more priority to renewable energy. And it may be an obvious, conclusion and obvious development when you look at this development from India, but looking from outside, and particularly importantly, looking from the perspective of Russian business, it is not so obvious. So these developments in India, they also open up opportunities for completely new strands of cooperation between countries, and India is at such an important point in its development when, without exaggeration, the entire climate change agenda of the whole world, without exaggeration, really depends on the decisions taken in India by policymakers, by business leaders, by developers, by innovators. So I cannot overestimate, the importance of the subject, and I wanted to let you know how in the business school several departments work together to bring out research on this subject that we find quite significant.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Kulik. So, we were just wondering in terms of universities contributing. So in the report that you have been talking about, what kind of contribution, the report, if at all any, talked about universities contributing in a major way in fostering many things in terms of, it could be innovation, it could be, climate and regulatory measures, and trying to understand the ecosystem in a much more better and holistic way. So any thoughts on the university's role?
Universities, yes. Skolkovo, being a business school, has a unique angle and unique exposure to real businesses and real decision makers who are actually implementing the research in their practical business and in their day-to-day dealings. So the impact of this research being put forward by a business school is particularly impactful, as I find it, and as I see the interest that it has awoken and how it is actually used in practical work by companies. We have published a couple of other researches, for instance, on the digital transformation of India going from local phenomena to global influencer. It is also a very practice-oriented research paper. We had experience of researching changing consumer behavior in India. So this climate change report is a report in a string of research papers that we have published, and all of them are very practice-oriented. But being such an important and sensitive subject at the moment, and being the most recent report, I find it, of course, the most impactful of all.
Thank you, Professor Kulik. Thank you very much. Now let me move to Professor Suherman, and he's representing Soedirman University, Indonesia. Professor, over to you.
Thank you, moderator, and also all the honorable panelists who already joined in this forum. Okay. First of all, I would like to share my perspective and also my view from Indonesian angle. I think because it's Indonesia is quite different with maybe with Australia and also maybe Russia and etc. Dealing with research policy in my country. Today, that Indonesia still focusing on how to anticipate the post-pandemic COVID-19. So the government still how to revitalize the society and also the economy and the environment. So the government asked to all the researchers to focus on the point, I think. And as we know that some areas that should be research, I think, should be explored in my country, still connected with the issue such as how to explore the blue economy and also the green economy, because as we know that Indonesia as the archipelagic state, so Indonesia has to be more more focused on the blue economy, which means that all economic facilities or we can optimize the ocean resources from the archipelagic state, and also the green economy from the agriculture country. We should have a strength on the point, I think. But according to my opinion from Suherman University, especially in my university, that I think not only it's work in my university, but it's kind of general policy from the government concerning the research policy from the government. So I think mostly the university in Indonesia has kind of monodiscipline area. So it's quite strange if we try to work in a multidiscipline or transdiscipline area. Still, I think the university mostly they don't care about that area. They just focus to one discipline, and then maybe some area we can learn and discuss, and also some study program as well already available in my country that's manage the transdisciplinary knowledge, and also some transdisciplinary approach to try to focus on the certain object or certain the field of studies like that. I think so it's one obstacle, I think, from my university point of view, that not quite a lot the teaching staff who interested in transdisciplinary approach to explore something or to search something, to investigate something, and then at the end we want to share for the society, for the community. It is my opinion, I think, from my university. And one else, I think, last but not least, I think it's quite hard to spend time, because it's just very limited time for doing research, because normally the teaching staff in Indonesia has very lot of hours. I mean, they spend the time for teaching. That teaching is too much. I think that the time for teaching is unlimited. So for research, it's quite a limited time, not really available for doing research, I think. That's my opinion, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Suherman. I think something that you said, it's very important in terms of the research policy, but I was just wondering that how much consultation process, what kind of processes, do you follow, or do you, in terms of bringing all the stakeholders together? When you talk about research policy that might affect a large number of people, what kind of role that your university, or other universities are playing in that regard?
Yes. Recently, that our research and also the teaching process in my university, and I think in all university in Indonesia, now we have kind of new program from our ministry, the higher education institution, that it's kind of obligation for all the university, yes, to have kind of a blended program like research or teaching, yes, or community service, because we have three kinds of obligation as teaching staff in Indonesia. First, as the researchers, also the second, as of course, as a teacher, and also we have to share and to give a kind of a contribution for community service for the society. So new programs already implemented that all the students, all the teaching staff, and etc. should involve in blended program, and we have to involve many institutions, that related institution. For example, in my faculty, because I work as teaching staff as a lawyer, as also a professor in law, and also we have to have a good relationship with other law institution in national level or in local level, I think. So we can conduct a research concerning how to enforce the certain regulation, and also how to give the student the experience in practicality, how to implement their knowledge during the what is the study. And then we also invite the people who already practice in certain business or institution. They invited to come to university and then to teach the student. And also in research, we have to sign the contract with the contracting party. I mean, we have to what I should say, that in the requirement for doing research, yes, in my university, we have to sign the contract between the stakeholders. Whatever the stakeholders, we have to provide that document, whether in national or in local or international level, in research collaboration. So we have to provide that document. After that, the title and the proposal will be approved by the university. I think.
Thank you, Professor Suherman. Now, let me, I mean, since we're talking about, different disciplines here, let me put this question to you, first to the four of you. What strategy do you suggest for catalyzing quality, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary academic research in all fields in the university spaces? So if I may start with Professor Evans, and then we follow the same order. Thank you.
Thank you. I think while there is certainly an appetite from many faculty to engage in such research, it tends not to happen spontaneously. There are so many structures, particularly at a large bureaucratic university, that keep people apart from one another. And I'm a little afraid that as we have more people working from home more often, that some of the spontaneous, serendipitous engagements that people could have, at a morning tea or in a coffee room have diminished even further. So I think it needs a deliberate strategy by the university to encourage and incentivize multidisciplinary research for particular social outcomes, and also to try and eliminate the hurdles that I spoke about before. So, for example, the way Griffith has done it, we've set up what we call our research beacons. And these are 5-year programs of work, and we put out a call across the university, and that encouraged lots of people to start talking across disciplinary boundaries, not just the successful 3. And one of them, the 3 are climate change action, inclusive futures for people with disabilities, and disrupting violence, particularly violence against women and children. Now, none of those outcomes can be achieved by one discipline alone. So we put real money on the table. There was $1 million a year for 5 years. People stay in their own disciplines. It's not a physical bricks and mortar centre, but the leadership of these groups has to come from at least 3 to 4 different disciplines. And that doesn't mean theoretical physics and optical physics. We had a few people sort of saying, you know, different flavours of maths was one. They had to be from different faculties. But we also were very clear they had to set out very clearly an ambitious research agenda and a research agenda clarity about both the social impact goals, but also many of the traditional research goals in the university, because I don't think the two are necessarily in tension. Now that's already had some good outcomes. We've also required that they have an advisory board that is made up by users. So for our disabilities beacon, for example, that's people with lived experiences of disability. For people in climate change action, it's people with a wide range of different community, government and industry backgrounds. But it's still not without its difficulties. You know, we keep finding issues around, people get very focused on the administrative side of things. So if I write a highly cited research paper, does it count for my beacon? Does it count for my research centre? Does it count for my faculty? Now, these should be extraordinarily trivial issues in light of the serious outcomes that we're all committed to achieving. And yet it can just be the way that in universities, those are what people become focused on, or what their supervisors become focused on. So a very small but practical thing that we've certainly tried to do is just being willing to double count, instead of saying, you know, no, you can only have half of this or a quarter of that or whatever it is. Just say full credit can go to 2 areas of the university in terms of all the awards and accolades and the financial flow-ons. But and I know that sounds trivial and trite compared to some of the really serious big issues that we're looking at, but if we don't sometimes pay attention to those smaller issues, as well as making sure there's real funding and the right sort of incentives on the table, then I think we can easily get lost in a lot of sort of goodwill and rhetoric that ends up not having practical results.
Absolutely. You know, thank you so very much, Professor Evans. And I couldn't agree more that we need to create that ecosystem in universities to promote and incentivize the kind of research that we're talking about. So, Professor Ferrari, for your comments.
Thank you. It's a complex question, and I guess that all our universities have a range of strategies, and maybe we can do more. I think we can still think ahead, even when we have implemented a number of opportunities for interaction and exchange and transdisciplinary thinking. So in the case of the University of Edinburgh, climate and sustainability are the sort of goals at the heart of all our mission. So we think about climate and sustainability around teaching, research, partnership, learning, and sustainability is somehow one of the 3 themes. So by implementing a kind of central goals for developing research, we feel that would encourage our university to exchange and interact, and particularly this would provide the vision and the goals and the sort of values that we want to promote as an institution. So we have 3 research and innovation missions or themes, and these sort of tackle everything we do across the university. And of course, we will have a broad range of research the development of research programs and research projects that perhaps are have different scales and level of engagement globally, but they do deal with a range of subjects that are associated and disconnected with these three themes as well. So the other two missions are related to future health and care and data and artificial intelligence. So these are our kind of three goals. Now, how we implement development of research along these three goals is through a number of vehicles which we have set up to bring together academics across the university and to engage in this kind of in challenges related with these three themes. So particularly in relation to sustainability, we have recently set up the Edinburgh Earth Initiative, which is a sort of loose structure that cuts across boundaries of the university. So we have three colleges for health, for science and engineering, and arts, humanities, and social sciences. And under one umbrella, these organization is bringing together these different groupings and networks that exist across the university to create connections and perhaps think together when funding opportunities emerge. And we provide a sort of central support and portal so we can reach a range of audiences and really generate the real impact, which is within the three missions. So I suppose that both by creating structures centrally that could help bridging connections, by developing partnerships that are very much associated to understanding the realities, the context-specific challenges, and by enabling these sort of more academic-led research collaborations and making sure that we facilitate those at different scales and smaller, one-to-one connections between academics across different universities globally. And also, I guess that through the innovation part of our university is also ensuring that we enable connections between our academic communities and societal groups and maybe private sector organizations to think about real actions, concrete actions, and potential solutions that could lead to could have a really strong impact at the local level.
Fantastic. I think, the key is to identify those issues and where the focus should be. I think that is where we need to bring in all the stakeholders. Thank you so very much, Professor Ferrari. Over to you, Dr. Kulik.
It's a great question, actually. The first answer that comes into mind is that it is influenced by business. We do research which is of interest to business and which is influenced by business. But this answer is wrong, because if you just follow the interests of business, you get behind. Actually, you are too late. So we try to anticipate the issues which are somewhere behind the horizon. It takes thinkers, policymakers, actually brainstorming of experts who are on the cutting edge of different trends and nuances to understand where we need to look, what is coming, and to bring out research that is forward-looking and that is not outdated and that is not coming too late, for business decision makers, for instance. The good example is our report on India Goes Digital, from local phenomenon to global influencer, because it is published both in Russian and in English. It is actually turning out to be of use and of interest even to our colleagues and partners in India, because it was put together in the year of the pandemic in 2020, when of course everyone was busy, fighting their wars with the health crisis. But we could see the trends that are developing and unfolding in India, and really the path of digital transformation in India was so remarkable that it was obvious that India would become an influencer in this path, even on the global scale, in the way the country develops digital public goods, in the way they become egalitarian and available to all strides of society. So, and of course, the way they influence businesses, not just India's businesses, but international foreign businesses that are looking at India as a market and as a partner. So that's how we came to this subject, for instance, and we put together this research, which was probably one of the first, systematized summaries. In this research report, you find many numbers outdated in 1 year, because India is developing so fast. Things in terms of statistics, for instance, they become outdated quite fast. We had to update the numbers in this report even after 1 year of its publication. But some trends that were captured in this report are very valid, and they're really long-lasting. And actually, this is one of the examples how looking beyond the horizon with the help of experts, thinkers, and really cutting-edge researchers is helpful, and how it makes it possible to bridge academic research with the practical needs and practical requirements of, in our case, businesses.
No, I think it is fantastic, because we have to sort of cross-disciplinary boundaries at some point of time. And the bigger problems that we're talking about is not limited to one discipline. And therefore, we should be comfortable in sort of crossing those boundaries. Thank you so very much, Dr. Kulik. Professor Suherman, you're talking about, monodimensional approach. Maybe you want to reflect upon this question, and how do you see this, as a response? What could be the possible response in the context of, your university, or maybe generally about universities in Indonesia?
Okay, right. I think in this respect, I would point out about the main policy in research in my country. Mostly the budgets from the government is allocated for the hard science. I mean, the hard science area. I mean, because it's spend a lot of things to spend or to buy, because it's quite big money we need in the research. And also the second qualification, we should conduct kind of social science research. So I'm as one lecturer in Faculty of Law, so it's classified in social research science. So it's not really need big money or big investment in that project. So but in this respect, in terms of transdisciplinary approach, I think many problems in Indonesia, we need a kind of how to anticipate the social problems, and also the environment problem, and also how to manage the people, how to make them in good condition economically or socially, because we are still in developing countries. So we need kind of more persuasive approach for the people, for the society. So I think talking about a research scheme in my university, there are two kinds of research. I think for the fundamental research, and also for the kind of practical research. And also we have also kind of the research that's only available for the professor. So from the professor has a certain channel, I mean a certain budget. All the professor can use that facility test. So the university offer us the certain budget for the professor, but I think still not enough, I think, to cover all the expenditure, I think. And also one thing that's important in my country, so we always concern and also should work on something very practical, how to make our report in financial report, and for example tax system, and how to pay the tax for the research, and etc. It is I think mostly the researchers don't like that. So it's I think a big lot of influence from that point. I think so because we have to be responsible as the civil service, as the government should ask the responsibility for all the researchers. So that one point as well. And one thing that in our country there is kind of independent learning and independent campus. It's very good, I think, good policy from our educational ministry in Indonesia, because we have to try to collaborate with other institutions, either in Indonesia or in other countries. So I think it's a good point to implement that policy from the government. But particularly for the international research collaboration, it is not a big number, I think, for the researcher who can involve in the project. Because of what? Because yes, lack of linkage with or relation with other university in international cooperation or other stakeholders. I mean, we need kind of partnership, like more partnership, and also maybe lack of capacity in how to explore the contract in English. I mean, in a research contract between our university and the overseas university. I think that's my perspective concerning my university policy in research program. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I mean, it seems that, you know, I mean, of course, we are receiving some questions from the audience as well. I'll come to that in a minute. But it seems that there are, you know, there is an absolute need to collaborate among different stakeholders. Yes. It's not within the country, but beyond the jurisdiction. But in that context, if I may place this question to all the panelists, can you please suggest some kind of innovative framework so that close research linkages can be developed amongst government, industry, private philanthropic organizations, and researchers in academic settings? We'll follow the same order. Professor Evans.
That's a very big question. And I think really the answer is it depends. That there isn't a single framework, that partnerships that are serious, that are deep, that are transformative, take a long time, a lot of energy, a lot of goodwill, give and take. Universities are not always easy to deal with. We have our own ways of doing things, our own language, our own ways of dividing people up, our rules and regulations that we've invented and rules and regulations that governments have invented for us. So to really make partnerships work, not at a trivial set up a few internships for student level, but really substantial and transformative, takes a long time. And there isn't a single pattern for it. So what might work for us, having a really substantial health innovation partnership with our local hospital, which we do, is quite different to what works with us placing our musical theatre students physically in the Performing Arts Centre, so they do all their learning side by side with professional arts people. Yeah. And the way that we work with the Mongolian emergency services to try and help really develop the field of paramedicine in Mongolia is very different to the way that we work in Vanuatu with our students regularly attending to try and help them on marine developing marine engineering that will be important to save the planet from climate change. So, I wish I could say, here's what I baked earlier. You can use this and it will work for everything. But I think that there are some key principles. One is you've got to work with partners that share your values. If you don't start with the same broad set of values and the same broad set of objectives, you might as well not start at all. You've got to be in it for the long term. It can't just be about what you want to get out of it. It has to be about really what the partner wants as well. But you do also have to think about yourself. Sometimes business expects universities to just throw all their intellectual capital and students and so forth over the fence without any thought for their own benefit. You have to come to it with integrity, and you have to have that expectation of your partner. So there are some broad principles, but I'm afraid I don't really see a framework that will just work for everything.
I must say, there are multiple things. Probably we would need a separate session for this question, but thank you for your attempt, Professor Ferrari.
I would agree. I do not think that there will be one framework, but I think there are guiding principles that we need to ensure that we embed in every partnership. Trust is key, and the fact that a partnership should be equitable. And I do have a little bit of a question around values, because we are discussing across our universities this notion of a value-driven institution constantly. And I think we have to be really careful, because the way we develop those values will be related to our own context-related experiences and needs. And how do we share these values? It might need that we kind of create a new set of principles and a new set of needs that might not be available in the individual value setting that we might have as an institution. So we have to be really careful. Overall, I think we work, my research is very much related with increasing resilience across the most vulnerable areas of cities in the global south. And to these, the approach that we have taken is based on co-production. So how do we bring together the sort of different levels of knowledge? How do we create a dialogue of knowledges which will really bring to the understanding that all forms of knowledge are valid? So how political institutions will provide a type of knowledge, academic institutions will also provide knowledge, as well as communities who may have a clear understanding of their territory, the sort of risks that they confront every day, and the actions that they take to mitigate these, to monitor risk. So that therefore the knowledge is really important. But when we bring action, so when we think about research and the sort of activities that research will relate with, we could think about scale. So what is the scale of our influence? Do we want to work directly? Do we want to influence our international community of academics, or do we want to influence a kind of group of national governments, a regional government group, or do we want to influence local practices? So I think that's really important. And then finally is who makes decisions and who are these decisions for? So what are the power relations that are required to really implement transition, change, and a sort of positive transformation for the future? I think these are the principles that I feel are important in any partnership.
Thank you very much for sharing this wonderful framework. Dr. Kulik, maybe you want to contextualize this question in the background of the report, because you have been working with 3 different countries and how it all worked out. Over to you.
Actually, there is probably no better framework for engaging stakeholders than discussion and open dialogue. And also research centers at schools and universities, they have a privilege. They're not consultants, they don't have to answer every question that is posed to them and that is coming from stakeholders or clients, let's say. The subject has to be of interest to researchers personally as well, to scientists and to people who actually conduct this research and answer the questions that are posed. And here we are coming to the core of academic work, that actually it has to be of interest to those people who are conducting this work. And there is no better way of finding the subjects that are of importance and of interest to everyone than this discussion. And then I would agree to previous speakers that university, a school, is also looking at broader importance and impact of its work, and it has the privilege of picking up subjects and focusing on research that it finds impactful and important in its, I would say portfolio, but we're not talking about, commercial portfolio as such, but the values at the core that fit each individual school and research center.
Thank you, Dr. Kulik. Professor Suherman, we have just about a minute, and then we'll have 30 seconds, because it's only fair that we should respond to at least one question from the audience. So over to you, Professor.
Yes. Okay, still focusing on the research collaboration, I think, about because GGU always concerned in global spirit, so we always talk about something global, yes, in including the research. Okay, I think I try to make some statement here. I mean, that's because theoretically it is about collaboration, including in research. So we have to refer to kind of triple helix, or now it's already become a pentahelix collaboration. So at first stage, we just need three elements in collaboration, like academician and academics, government, and also business. And also we need kind of society and also media. So I think from my point of view, particularly in Indonesia, yes, it's mostly all the researchers just want to try to publish in a reputable journal, reputable international journal. That's it. So they don't want to make a kind of further step, how to communicate, how to collaborate, and how to contribute to the society. This, I think, is bottleneck between researcher and the community, the society. I think it should be kind of, yes, we need kind of new policy, how to communicate and contribute the research result for the society. I think that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me have the final thought or a question from the audience. So I'm just reading out for the benefit of all of you. How does the university engage with local communities, industry partners, and government bodies to promote sustainability and climate justice via embedding research? I guess we have answered this question a bit already, but if you want to add any final thoughts, because we are maybe 30 seconds, if I may, and then we'll close. Yeah. So Professor Evans, we can start from you, and then.
So just being very quick, there are lots of different ways to do that. So given we're only speaking for about 30 seconds, let me remind people about the importance of local governments, local councils, state, provincial, whatever it might be in your area. They can be difficult to work with, but sometimes they are often the democratically elected representatives of a particular community, and they often have access to elements of those communities that you can work with. So I'd certainly think about them as one conduit into the broader community, but certainly you wouldn't want to limit yourself only to that.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Professor Evans. Professor Ferrari.
Thank you. Yes, I agree that there's no single answer to this, but we, for example, feel that engaging with local NGOs and making sure that we reach directly communities, obviously we would work with government as well, but I think there's sometimes in certain contexts a bit of a discrepancy between government institutions and local community institutions. So I think it's important to reach this sort of collective organizations that we have at the local level and engage with them as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ferrari. Dr. Kulik, anything that comes out of the report or general thoughts? Thank you.
Actually, when we focus too much on strategic issues, local communities are a great reality checkpoint. When you are too high level in your research, it's impossible to strive for objectivity. So you have to keep the balance, and local communities are the best reality check for any research, actually.
Thank you, Dr. Kulik. Final words, Professor Suherman.
Okay, I think it's very short. I think there is no problem. There is no problem can be solved only one single discipline. So we need kind of multidisciplinary approach, yes, to solve the problem, and also we need to collaborate each other in pentahelix perspective. I think that's my point.
Thank you so very much. Let me sort of try to summarize as quickly as I can. I think it is a multi-pronged problems and requires multi-pronged solutions. There has to be a mix of global and local, with a better understanding, having a better sensibility of the issues that probably we need to work on, yet we need to balance researchers' interest, institutional interests, a country's interest, and so long and so forth. So I think we have sort of ended our session on a very positive note, and with a strong message that it is time for us to collaborate both at the university level, both at the level of different stakeholders within the jurisdictions and beyond. Without that, we cannot engage in research that may be construed as socially responsible research. Thank you all for your wonderful thoughts. Thank you for the question from the audience. And thank you, Professor Evans, Professor Ferrari, Dr. Kulik, and Professor Suherman for joining us this morning, evening, or we can say just good day. Thank you so very much, and I hope to see you soon whenever you visit India, whenever I'm traveling abroad. Thank you. Thank you again.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.